People underestimate kids. They think children don't notice things adults hide, or that they're too scared to act when danger creeps close. But sometimes, a child sees everything and knows exactly what to do. That was the case in one quiet neighborhood, where a black maid's young son stood frozen beside a police officer and his K-9 partner. From the outside, it looked like nothing, just a routine visit, a calm moment on a calm day. But then the boy raised his hand and made a small, quick gesture. Most adults wouldn't recognize it. Most would think he was fidgeting or nervous. But the police dog did. Instantly. And what happened next shocked everyone on that lawn, because the boy wasn't just signaling the dog. He was warning it. And within seconds, the truth that kid had been carrying alone came crashing out in a way no one expected. Before we continue, I just want to thank you for watching. If you enjoy emotional, suspenseful stories like this one, make sure to hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications. It really helps the channel grow, and you won't miss any of our upcoming stories. The neighborhood was the kind of place where people pretended everything was perfect. Lawns trimmed to military precision, cars washed every Saturday morning, smiles exchanged at the mailbox even if no one meant them. But behind those closed doors, secrets lived. And sometimes, those secrets were heavier than anyone wanted to admit. Mara knew that better than most. She had worked as a maid for years, bouncing from one wealthy household to another, always quiet, always respectful, always doing her job with the kind of diligence that made homeowners feel comfortable leaving her alone in their immaculate kitchens and pristine living rooms. But as polite as they were to her face, Mara had learned that respect was something these kinds of people rarely offered to someone who wore an apron for a living. Her son, Isaiah, was 9 years old, sharp-eyed, curious, soft-spoken. He was the kind of kid who remembered small details, where he last placed a book, the sound of someone's footsteps, the way a dog's ears tilted when it sensed something unusual. And he adored animals, especially dogs. He could spend hours watching training videos, memorizing the body language handlers used with K-9 units, fascinated by the bond between officer and animal. But Mara never let Isaiah come with her to work. Not until today. The homeowners had begged Mara to bring him. "We're having contractors in," Mrs. Layton insisted. "There will be noise everywhere. Just bring the boy with you, he can sit on the porch." Mara didn't like the idea, but she didn't have many options. Bills didn't pay themselves. And one day of Isaiah sitting quietly on a chair with a book didn't seem like it would cause trouble. At least that's what she thought. She hadn't expected the police car to pull up to the curb. She hadn't expected the K-9 officer to step out, tall, stone-faced, with a German shepherd at his heel. And she definitely hadn't expected the chain of events that were about to unfold, events that would leave an entire cul-de-sac staring, breathless, unsure of what they had just witnessed. But the moment the patrol car stopped in front of the Layton house, Mara's heart dropped into her stomach. Isaiah was standing on the porch holding the railing lightly, watching the officer approach. The dog beside him walked with perfect discipline, eyes alert, tail still. Officer Grant was known around town. People described him as strict, no-nonsense, intimidating. He was the kind of man who didn't raise his voice because he didn't need to. His eyes did the talking. He approached Mara with a curt nod. "Ma'am, we're doing a house-to-house check. Reports of a breaking and entering suspect in the area. Have you seen anything unusual?" "No, sir," Mara answered quickly, hands clasped together. "Just doing my job." Isaiah stood quietly, looking from the officer to the dog, then back again. He didn't move, didn't speak. But his posture wasn't exactly calm either. His fingers twitched slightly at his side, like he was thinking hard about something. Officer Grant surveyed the area, his expression unchanging. The German shepherd sniffed the air, taking in scents only it could interpret. Mara exhaled shakily. She wasn't afraid of the officer exactly. It was the situation. She didn't want any trouble. She didn't want Isaiah involved in anything dangerous. But the boy's eyes suddenly narrowed, focusing on the dog, then on Officer Grant's hand. Something clicked in his mind. Mara noticed it, the subtle shift in his breathing, the way his shoulders straightened. Isaiah was noticing something. And that, more than anything, frightened her. She was about to step toward him when Isaiah suddenly lifted his hand to his chest. At first, Mara thought it was a nervous habit. He sometimes tugged at his shirt when he felt uncomfortable, but this time was different. His fingers curled, extended, curled again, forming a pattern. A deliberate pattern. A signal. Mara froze. No, he couldn't be doing what she thought he was doing. Not here, not now. But Officer Grant noticed it instantly. The dog noticed even faster. Its ears shot up, its body stiffened. Its eyes locked not on Isaiah but on something behind him. Officer Grant's voice snapped in the air like a whip. "Kid, don't move." Mara's stomach twisted. "Isaiah, what are you doing?" But Isaiah didn't answer. His eyes were still fixed on the dog, his hand moving again, a quick motion, then a tap on his leg. Another K-9 command. One that only trained handlers were supposed to know. Officer Grant stared at the boy, expression hardening in disbelief. "Where did you learn that?" Isaiah didn't respond. Instead, he stepped aside, just one step but enough for the dog to shift position. And then Mara understood. Isaiah wasn't signaling the dog. He was signaling the officer. A secret distress signal. Something he must have seen in those K-9 videos, the kind used when a person was in danger but couldn't speak freely. Her son was telling the officer something was wrong. But what? Before Mara could ask, the back door of the Layton house slammed open. And Mr. Layton stepped out. He looked irritated, his shirt partially untucked, his face flushed, not with exertion but with the kind of anger that simmered right under the surface. He marched toward them with the confidence of someone who believed the world owed him obedience. "There a problem, officer?" he demanded, folding his arms. Officer Grant glanced at Isaiah again. "Your boy just gave a K-9 distress signal." Layton snorted. "He's just playing, you know how kids are." But Isaiah shook his head slowly. "No, I'm not." The officer's eyes sharpened. "Kid, are you in danger?" Isaiah hesitated, then he whispered, "Not me." And then he pointed. Straight at the back of the house. At the door Layton had just come from. Mara staggered back. "Isaiah, baby, what's happening?" "All morning," Isaiah said softly, "I heard noises like crying and someone saying, 'Please stop.'" The air turned cold. Layton's face tightened. "Officer, this is ridiculous. He's making up stories." But Isaiah continued, voice trembling. "And then I heard him yelling and a slap, and then something fell." Mara's breath caught. She felt sick. She had been vacuuming. She hadn't heard anything. But Isaiah, he always noticed the things adults missed. Officer Grant stepped forward. "Sir, I'm going to need to check inside." Layton raised his hands, irritated. "Unless you have a warrant." A muffled thud echoed from inside the house. Everyone froze. The dog growled, low and dangerous. Grant's hand went to his radio. "Dispatch, send backup, possible domestic." The maid Mara gasped as the back door cracked open again, this time just an inch. A sliver of movement, fingers clutching the frame. A faint, trembling voice. "Help!" Officer Grant didn't wait another second. He pushed past Layton, the dog bounding beside him. Layton tried to grab his arm, but Mara screamed, "Don't touch him." The dog whipped around and barked sharply, teeth bared. Layton froze. Isaiah ran to his mother's side, clinging to her leg as screams and shouting erupted inside the house. Mrs. Layton, who had been unseen until now, stumbled into view, bruised, trembling, tears streaming down her face. Layton's expression shattered. Fear replaced arrogance. Within seconds, additional police vehicles skidded to a stop in front of the house. Neighbors gathered on their lawns, whispers spreading like wildfire. Officer Grant emerged, dragging Layton out in handcuffs, face twisted with rage and humiliation. The dog stayed at his heel, calm and watchful. Mrs. Layton leaned heavily against the doorframe, shaking uncontrollably. Mara covered her mouth in horror. She had worked in this home for months and had never known the woman was suffering in silence. Isaiah looked up at the officer with wide, fearful eyes. Did I do the right thing?" Officer Grant knelt in front of him. "Kid, you didn't just do the right thing." He put a firm hand on Isaiah's shoulder. "You saved someone's life today." Mara burst into tears, pulling Isaiah into her arms, overwhelmed with fear, pride, and disbelief. But the street was silent. because everyone was staring. No one had ever seen a child communicate with a police dog, much less give a distress signal that stopped a violent crime. The headlines would later say, "Boy's secret signal saves abuse victim." But in this moment, all Mara could think was, her son had changed everything, and nothing would ever be the same. The flashing police lights bathed the entire neighborhood in red and blue, washing over the stunned faces of the gathered neighbors. Mara held Isaiah close, feeling his small heart pounding against her chest. Even now, after everything that had happened, he was trembling. But he stayed still, his face pressed into her shoulder, silent and exhausted. Officer Grant finished securing Layton in the back of the squad car before walking back toward the porch. His expression had softened, something almost fatherly replacing the stern lines of his usual demeanor. But right beneath that softness simmered a quiet fury, the kind only an officer felt when he realized someone had suffered behind closed doors for a very long time. Mrs. Layton sat on the porch steps wrapped in a blanket an EMT had given her. Her eyes were swollen, her cheeks still blotchy from the slap Isaiah must have heard earlier. Her hands shook so badly she had to hold them together to keep from dropping the water bottle they'd offered her. She looked up when Grant approached. "I didn't want anyone to know," she whispered, voice breaking. "I didn't want my son to see me like this." Grant crouched in front of her gently. "Ma'am, you should have never gone through this alone." She tried to smile, but it only made her tears spill over again. "I thought keeping quiet would protect him. I thought maybe my husband would change." Grant's jaw tightened. Abusers don't change because their victims stay silent. They only get worse. Mara stood a few feet away, hugging Isaiah, unable to pull her eyes away from the woman she had worked beside for months. She had cleaned the woman's house, folded her laundry, put away dishes in her kitchen, never knowing the bruises she sometimes glimpsed weren't accidents or clumsiness, but pain intentionally inflicted. A few neighbors muttered amongst themselves, some scandalized, others suddenly acting sympathetic as if they had always cared. But Mara noticed how quickly their eyes shifted toward her. She could feel their stares, the subtle judgment, the silent worries, the uncomfortable realization that, yet again, the maid had been the one closest to a secret none of them had noticed. Isaiah tugged lightly at her sleeve. "Mom, I didn't want to make trouble." Mara knelt to his level, cupping his cheeks. "Baby, you didn't make trouble." "But everyone's staring," Isaiah whispered, trying not to cry, "like I did something wrong." Mara pulled him into her arms again. "You did something brave, and you saved someone. Don't you ever think otherwise." Officer Grant approached them then, placing a gentle hand on Mara's shoulder. "Ma'am, may I speak with him for a moment?" She hesitated, but Isaiah nodded, so she stepped aside just enough for Grant to kneel down in front of the boy. "You know those signals you gave," Grant said softly. "Most adults don't even know them. Where did you learn that?" Isaiah wiped his nose with the back of his hand. "Videos. I like watching K-9 officers and search dogs. Sometimes, when Mom works late, I watch them on her phone." Grant raised an eyebrow, impressed. "Do you remember exactly which signal you used?" Isaiah nodded slowly. "Closed fist, held at the chest. That means someone is in danger but can't talk, and the tap on the leg means the dog should look for danger behind the person talking." Grant blinked, astonished. "Kid, that's advanced." He shook his head, chuckling softly. "You're smart, real smart." Isaiah shrugged in that shy way children do when they don't know how to accept praise. But then Grant's expression shifted, serious, almost concerned. "Isaiah, how did you know the danger was real? You said you heard things, but how did you know it wasn't a misunderstanding or TV or a contractor dropping something?" Isaiah looked down at his shoes. Then he whispered, "Because I saw him." Grant leaned closer. "Saw who?" Isaiah took a shallow breath. "Mr. Layton." Mara's heart skipped. Isaiah's voice trembled. "I saw him yelling at her, through the crack in the kitchen door. Mom didn't see me because she was vacuuming, but I saw him grab her arm really hard, and I saw her fall back against the counter." Mara covered her mouth, horrified. "Isaiah, why didn't you tell me?" "Because," he whispered, "she looked at me when she fell, and she shook her head a little bit, like she was saying, 'Don't move, don't come in.' I think she didn't want me to get hurt." A heavy silence fell. Even the neighbors stopped whispering. Mrs. Layton gasped behind them. She brought her trembling hands to her face, sobbing harder than before. I saw him walking by, Isaiah continued with a crack in his voice, and he was holding his belt. Mara felt her knees weaken. Officer Grant's entire expression changed. The hard set of his jaw returned, his eyes narrowing. He stood abruptly, looking toward the squad car where Layton sat, now pounding on the window and shouting muffled profanities. Grant turned toward the officers still documenting evidence. Get photos of everything. Every mark, every bruise. Child testimony, eyewitness account, audio disturbance call. We're stacking every charge we can. Then he looked back at Isaiah and softened again. You did the right thing. You saw someone in trouble and you acted. That's not making trouble, that's being a hero. Isaiah blinked up at him. Heroes are supposed to be brave. Grant smiled gently. Being brave doesn't mean you're not scared. It means you did something anyway. Isaiah's shoulders relaxed for the first time since the officers arrived. But part 2 was far from over. Because what Grant discovered inside the house was only the beginning. Hours later, after the officers had taken Layton away and the ambulance had transported his wife to a clinic for further examination, Grant returned to Mara and Isaiah while evidence technicians swarmed through the house. He approached with a strange expression, one mixed with curiosity and something like concern. Mara, he said carefully, I need to ask you something. She stiffened. Why, yes. This isn't related to the arrest, but something happened inside, something unusual. Mara frowned. What do you mean? Grant hesitated, then gestured for them to step aside away from the neighbors. When we entered the house, Layton's dog reacted strangely, the shepherd in the backyard. Mara blinked. The little shepherd mix, it's always barking. Not today, Grant said quietly. Today it was hiding, terrified. That alone sent a chill through Mara, but Grant wasn't finished. When we found Mrs. Layton, she wasn't alone. She was trying to protect something. Mara's brows furrowed. Something. Grant nodded slowly. A child. Mara's breath caught. Her son. Grant shook his head. Not her son. A heavy silence fell. Isaiah stepped closer, voice barely above a whisper. Another kid. Grant nodded again. A girl, 7 years old. She was hiding behind the cupboard, holding her hands over her ears. He ran a hand over his face, exhausted. Mrs. Layton finally confessed. Layton's brother left the child with them months ago and never came back. Layton didn't want her in the house. He didn't want to waste resources on a child that wasn't his. So he started punishing her whenever she made noise, even accidentally. Myra staggered. Oh God. Isaiah pulled his mother's hand tight. Is she okay? She will be, Grant said gently. But she's traumatized. She wouldn't even look at the EMTs until I told my partner to bring the K9 inside. Myra blinked. The dog. Grant nodded. The moment she saw the dog, she came out. She went straight to him, buried her face in his fur. She trusted him before she trusted any human. Mara felt tears forming again. Isaiah whispered, dogs know when something's wrong. Grant looked at him with quiet respect. Yeah, and so do little boys who are more observant than they realize. There was a pause. A long one. Then Grant took a deep breath and said something Mara never expected. Isaiah, our department runs a youth program. It's for kids who have an interest in canine work. Observation, communication training, discipline, everything you naturally did today. Isaiah looked up, eyes widening. You mean like a K9 helper? A junior apprentice, Grant clarified. Nothing dangerous, just learning, training, building instincts. He smiled faintly. You've already got the instincts. Isaiah looked at his mother questioningly. Mara's heart ached with a mix of fear and pride. Her son, her quiet, gentle boy, had stepped into something bigger than himself. He had acted with courage she hadn't known he possessed, and now an officer believed in him. I think, Mara whispered, voice trembling, you should do it, if you want to. Isaiah nodded slowly, then more surely. I want to help people. Grant placed a large hand on his shoulder. Then you already started today. Just when Mara thought the night's events were ending, something else happened. Mrs. Layton approached them, wrapped in her blanket, tear-streaked, fragile but determined. Mara, she began softly, Thank you. If your son hadn't been here, I don't know what would have happened to me, or to her. Mara shook her head. You don't owe me thanks. Mrs. Layton knelt down in front of Isaiah. But I owe him my life. Isaiah swallowed hard, unsure what to say. Mrs. Layton smiled weakly. And when I'm stable, more will come out. Things the police need to know. Isaiah, you didn't just save me. You saved that little girl. Isaiah blinked rapidly, his small hand clutching his mother's. Mrs. Layton took a deep breath. Mara, Isaiah, anything you need, anything at all, you let me know. She stood unsteadily, and an EMT guided her back toward the ambulance. Grant exhaled, scratching the back of his neck. We're taking her and the girl to a shelter with protection. Layton will be held without bail. Good, Mara whispered fiercely. He deserves worse. Grant nodded once, agreeing silently. As the paramedics closed the ambulance doors, Isaiah looked up at his mother. Mom, does this mean it's over? Mara squeezed his hand. The danger, yes, but what you did today, that's not over. It's only the beginning. Grant smiled at them one last time before walking toward his vehicle. Isaiah watched the police dog jump into the backseat, tail wagging once before settling. He whispered almost to himself, I hope one day I get to work with a dog like that. Myra knelt and pulled him into her arms again. You will, she said softly. You're meant for things bigger than this neighborhood. Isaiah rested his head on her shoulder, comforted, safe. But the neighborhood. It would never forget what happened. A maid's son, quiet, observant, overlooked, had given a secret signal that changed everything. And in the weeks that followed, headlines would read, Police dog responds to hidden signal from child, abuse ring uncovered. Because Layton wasn't just angry. He was hiding something far darker. And Isaiah had just opened the door.